All right. Good morning, everyone. And those of us online, we are delighted to welcome Marc Zuckerberg to join us this morning. Is that what I just said? I was coming and picking you up actually, but no. We're gonna try that again. All right. See, that's what happens when I try to go off script. Yeah. We'll wait till the end on that part. No, I do not. Maybe next year. Next year's adolescent health topic. All right. So do-over. Delighted to welcome Dr. Marc Zimmerman, who is the Marshall Becker Collegiate Professor in the Department of Health Behavior and Health Education in the School of Public Health and a professor of psychology and the combined program in education and psychology at the University of Michigan. He received his PhD in psychology from the University of Illinois, and he is the editor of Youth and Society and the previous editor of Health Education and Behavior. His over 35 years of research has focused on adolescent health and resiliency and the application of empowerment theory focused primarily on violence and firearm injury prevention. He has published over 350 articles and 30 book chapters and co-edited 2 books on topics including violence, school safety, firearm risk, mental health, substance abuse, and evaluation methods. He is the only individual to have received the Distinguished Contribution Awards from both the Society for Community Research in Action and the Society for Public Health Education. He also received the University of Michigan's President's Award for Public Impact in 2019. He is the co-director of the Institute for Firearm Injury Prevention at the University of Michigan and PI of the CDC-funded Michigan Youth Violence Prevention Center and the CDC-funded Prevention Research Center, and MPI of the Bureau of Justice Assistance-funded National Center for School Safety, which is focused on violence prevention in schools, especially around firearm violence prevention. He also led development of youth empowerment solutions, after school prevention programming, which is an evidence-based prevention program for middle school students. And I can say personally that Dr. Zimmerman, as one of the mentors on my K Award, has been instrumental to my personal career development and to that of many other colleagues across multiple disciplines. He has a true passion for not only sort of doing the work that he does, but inspiring others and really help bringing all of us up into this field of violence prevention. So for that, I am very, very grateful and excited to welcome him this morning.
That's very kind. Thank you so much. And thank you for being here. I am always flattered when I'm invited to give a talk because I'm really just a dumb guy from New Jersey, a grocer's son. And I'm always amazed at the people I work with and how smart they are. And you know, and you read those things and you hear that. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is why I'm so busy. Anyway, I just want to start with saying that none of really what I'm talking about, there'll be occasionally I'll say I, but most of it is we. I don't do any of the work that you just heard about alone. Sometimes I help others and sometimes others help me, but it's always sort of a group effort. I'm a firm believer that you have to hear about other ideas, because if you think critically and think about and hear multiple points of view, it helps you, improves you and the work you do. Before I meant to say, oh, how do I go back? I won't go back. I'll just say the first slide was basically all of the centers that you just heard about, and they involve many people, colleagues, other professors and researchers, some who are physician researchers, some who are PhD researchers, mostly behavioral scientists, but not entirely. They include students, they include staff, and all of us really kind of work together to kind of come up with the ideas that I'm about to tell you. But I'm guided by kindergarten theory in my career. And so what I'm going to do is a little walkthrough of the work that I've done You'll see it. And so in that sense, it's I in terms of my career, but my career is definitely a we kind of thing. So in terms of kindergarten theory, be aware of wonder. Don't hit people. Hold hands and stick together. Clean up after yourself. Treat others the way you want to be treated, and most importantly, have fun and dance a lot. There's another one is wash your hands before you eat, and I probably should say that to a medical audience, but I left that one out. That's not necessarily related to the research, but these are the principles that really guided my work as a researcher over my career, and you'll see how they're all connected in a minute. So I got interested in violence a long time ago because it was something that kept rearing its ugly head as I studied adolescence. And so first, I'm going to just talk a little bit about some of the data that was also compelling, that kept driving me into this field and into this area. And then I'll talk about some of the research that I've used in going forward. So youth violence is basically intentional, on purpose. It's interpersonal, in between people, and it hurts people and hurts each other. 15% of kids report being bullied in school over the past 30 days. 20% over the past year report having in a fight. These are from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. 9% have said they feel unsafe in school or to and from school. A lot of times when we talk about school safety, many people, I think, erroneously think about the walls of the school. Two interesting things about that. One is there's also the process of going to and from school. And the second is that what happens in a neighborhood often comes into school, and what happens in a school often ends up going back into the neighborhoods. So to think about school violence in and of itself as the building is basically wrong-minded, I would say. And the other piece about this is, and as I've traveled around the country, is in Michigan and probably around here, we do have buildings that are schools, but in places like Arizona, they're more like a college or a university. It's actually a campus, and you walk between buildings. And so when you think about safety, walking between buildings or college campuses, that's an impossible kind of activity, because one of the strategies for basically for a school safety is locking doors and controlling entrance. Well, when you have a campus, it's a lot harder to control entrance onto the campus, let alone into all the different buildings. 7% of kids in schools have said that they've been threatened or hurt by someone threatening with a weapon. And let me just give you these numbers in perspective. On average, there's about between 500 and 600, I've seen some say 600 plus, is the average high school in the United States. The Youth Risk Behavior Survey is a CDC survey that they do every other year. It's supposedly representative. There's some comments that, well, it's voluntary by schools, so it may not be quite as representative as we think. It's one of the best data we have nationally of sampling of school youth. So that's another limitation of it. It's only school youth. But if the average high school is just 500, and again, it's more than that, 7% is 35 people, 35 kids who've said this. If a school is 9 months, if you figure 9 months, given some vacation time, whatever, that's 4 incidents a month. That's once a week this is happening in our schools across the United States. Now, we often hear about the shootings that occur. That's the tip of the iceberg, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. 4% have said they've carried a weapon. The Office of Juvenile Justice, OJJDP, actually says for males that's closer to 7%. And I've seen numbers here, it ranges. 4 is the lower end that I've seen, 3 or 4. I've actually seen as high as 7%. So it depends on the study. But again, now think about that. 4% of 500 is 20. 9 months a year. That's more than 2 times a month a child is bringing a weapon to school. It's not always a gun, but it often is. And And if you think about that for a minute, we've lost the battle. Sorry for using a violent analogy, but we've lost the battle if a kid feels like they need to bring a weapon to school, even if they never use it, even if they never threaten with it. 12 kids, and again, I've seen numbers here even higher than this. 12 kids between the ages of 1 and 19 die from homicide. A recent study from reporters at the Washington Post reported since Columbine, which is in our heads as one of the first school shootings that happened 25 years ago. It happened in 1999. Since then, 338,000 kids have been estimated to have experienced firearm violence in some way. Again, not necessarily the bullet hitting them, but being in that school when it happened. It's the #1 cause of death for kids 10 to 24 years old. The disparities are great. If you look at this graph, you can see it's a leading cause of death for Black youth. The blue line is overall of firearm deaths. The red line is homicide. The yellow line is suicide. So you can see African Americans are clearly far ahead of all others in terms of homicide. In terms of suicide, white kids, and you can see also Native American youth are the highest in that group. If you look at the data, this is age on the x-axis. The y-axis is fatalities per 100,000. The purple line is overall firearm deaths, and you can see the peak is when? The peak is exactly at, I'm getting a flashing thing up here. The peak is occurring just when we're talking to mostly pediatricians. Many people are working with youth. The peak is at those basically 10 to 24 years old. You can see the lines going up of all kinds of firearm death. The second line, and the one that I'm circling, that's homicide. And you can see the black line, homicide peaks around 24 and precipitously declines afterwards. So we're talking about this as a youth problem. And of course, it coincides with brain development. As you all know, the brain isn't fully developed. The frontal cortex isn't fully developed until about 24 to 26, maybe a little earlier for females, a little bit later for males. The red line is suicide. It also is high at that point, but you see suicide more in older years. The last line, the green line you can see is unintentional. Unintentional injuries, firearm deaths, you see that in the headlines. It really doesn't happen that often. It's horrific when a 6-year-old picks up a gun and plays with their father or mother's gun and then shoots their sibling. It's horrific. It makes the news, but it isn't as large a problem. However, we still need to deal with it. That doesn't mean we shouldn't. It's about 1% of all firearm deaths. In terms of pediatric firearm injury, this doesn't completely add up to a 100%, but most of it's homicide. Over almost 2/3 is homicide. About 1/3 is self-inflicted or suicide, and then the unintentional. Black youth are 10 times more likely to die by homicide than white youth. Not all homicides are firearms, but the vast majority of them are firearm related. In the early days of doing this work about 20 years ago, and really only sort of recently, many of you are working in medicine, and maybe all of you are working in medicine. Many of you are physicians. You may have heard, the NRA talking about stay out of your lane. This isn't your lane, and I've worked with emergency department docs, and they firmly say this is our lane. We're dealing with it. And Surgeon General Hatcher basically said, if it's not a health issue, why are so many people dying from it? So it's one of those issues where we can't afford to just have one solution, and one solution or one perspective on solutions, a criminal justice solution. It has to be bigger than that. All problems that we are dealing with have to be more than one profession. So it very much is our lane. Miller et al. estimated about $500 million is spent. This is based on quality of life, medical costs, and work loss. What we are just getting into, and I have some colleagues who've been working on this for many years, but we're needing to, I think more about what happens to everybody around that situation. I mean, I've talked to lots of kids who've been in schools where, there was a shooting, and what's happening to them and how they feel is affecting them. I heard a community partner that I know that you guys work with say that basically firearm violence touches all of us. If it's not direct, if we don't get hit by a bullet, it's still affecting us. I mean, I've heard people say, I don't want to send my kids to school for fear. Let me just say one point about that as well, and that is most schools are safe. Most schools don't have shootings. It makes the headlines. Mass shootings account for about 1 to 2% of all homicide, death, and injury. So it's very, very little. And of those 1 to 2% of firearm deaths, only 10% are in schools. Most of them are workplace. So it's a relatively rare event, as horrific as it is. And so I say that to not help people be too fearful about this, but also, obviously, we have to do something about it. So I'm going to now talk a little bit about what I'm doing. I am an unapologetic, as I said yesterday, applied researcher. I believe firmly that I do work to make a difference in people's lives. I did community organizing as a college student. So what I'm seeing on the news today, and I was involved in the post-60s kind of work that was happening on college campuses. What I noticed was data speaks to power. We were kids and we didn't have the data in front of us. We were often confronted with people who did have the data. And I thought at that moment, I need to learn how to do this. And that's why I went and got a PhD. Now, the kind of data, and I'm now the man, right? But the kind of data that I've gotten to collect is not the kind of data that that I thought about at that time. But I became an empiricist as a result, and I'm very evidence-based, but it's all applied. And that applied work is messy. So keep that in mind as I go forward. So one of the things that in my very early part of my career, we noticed that not all kids who had a risk factor ended up with the outcome. This is basically Michael Rutter's work, who is Sir Michael Rutter at this point. He had noticed that 50% of kids who have a depressed mother didn't themselves become depressed. But at the time, in the early 80s, most people were talking about, oh, your mother's depressed, then you're at high risk for this point. And everybody focused on that risk. But he said, well, what about the other 50%? What's right in their lives that they're not becoming depressed? And that work, he called it resilience, and he took the idea from physics about materials being resilient. Glass is not very resilient. It breaks pretty easily. Rubber is very resilient. It takes a long time to get rubber to snap. Unless it's an old rubber band, then of course they snap all the time. So I wrote this proposal way back when in 1994, actually before 1994, I got funded in 94 to study kids over time. And that was the Flint Adolescence Study. And we did a lot of work in that study. We followed kids for 4 years, starting in high school, initially to look at what's the leader, basically driven by resilience theory, and then what's the lead-lag relationship of drug use with school dropout. And that was really the main rationale for looking at kids over time to see, do they do drugs and then drop out, or do they drop out then do drugs? And not surprisingly, the National Institute of Drug Abuse funded this study. And then we wanted to see of the kids who that didn't happen for, what was going on right in their lives. That was the resiliency part. The quick answer, if you're wondering which happens, well, they start doing some drugs, they get disengaged in school. That disengagement leads to school dropout. So it's sort of more complicated, though, which leads to what. It's sort of they interact with each other. So one of the couple of things that we found was I worked with some folks who studied the Black identity. specifically African-American Black identity. And he had 3 different measures. Rob Seller's measure of public regard, what you think people, it was from the MIBI, the multiphasic inventory of Black identity. 3 components: public regard, what people think about other people think about Black people, what they think about themselves, private regard, and centrality. And we found that those factors, mostly centrality, but those factors, how you feel about yourself being Black, how much it's a part of your identity, and what you think about the public, made a difference in terms of predicting externalizing and internalizing behaviors. And in psychological parlance, that means internalizing behaviors like self-esteem, depression, anxiety, and externalizing behaviors are things like violent behavior and delinquency. So more identity, less of those problems. We also found that adults made a difference in kids' lives. There was a debate a little bit in developmental psychology about when adults become less relevant. What we have found pretty consistently in our work is that adults matter throughout the lifespan. Your parents, other people, and for kids, as they aged, it isn't that adults become less important. It's just that peers became more important, but adults kept their, and especially parents, kept their level of importance. So we found adults were relevant. We also found that participation, engagement in extracurriculars, whether that's sports or the chess club, doing things outside of school. And there's one reason some people think is because it keeps kids out of trouble because they're busy after school. Others say that's because they're developing skills, and it's probably a little bit of both. They're developing, positive skills, critical thinking skills, and other kinds of skills depending on what they're doing. Teamwork skills if they're on sports teams. So that led to we had an opportunity to write a grant proposal. I should keep track of the time here. We had the opportunity to write a grant proposal. There was a call for proposals on addressing youth violence, and we started through the Flint Adolescent Study. We also started studying lots of violence and violence variables. We weren't looking at specifically firearms. We were looking at weapons, that sort of thing. So I just hit on 3, and you'll see why in just a second. So we got this opportunity to write a grant proposal to CDC, and they funded one. We wanted to say, well, let's translate. It was the call for proposal, was about, was focused on youth violence, but not individual oriented. We have to look at focusing on change of the environment to reduce youth violence. So we sat around the table and said, oh, let's have youth be part of the solution instead of the focus of the problem. And this is some of the work that I had done in my dissertation around empowerment theory. So we took some of the ideas from empowerment theory and we said, let's create a curriculum for kids. So this was Don't Hit People. We started really getting more focused specifically on violent behavior. So this Youth Empowerment Solutions basically is a curriculum for middle school aged kids. We kind of created a scaffolding and infrastructure for helping train kids to be community change agents. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this, but first, I'm going to play a video to give you a sense of this. Did that work? So I should use the middle one? Oh, click on it over here. Is that what I'm supposed to do? Oh yeah, there we go.
This Saturday, we're gonna put 2 basketballs, so there's 2 courts.
The YES program is helping us clean out our park area.
18 from 9 in March to noon, we'll be out sweeping the track because if someone was to fall on it, it will cause very severe injuries.
Our project is that we're putting flowers in front of that school.
We're installing bleachers, all the ones that are back there for baseball fields. They're all run down.
And then we're gonna fix up the flagpole. We're gonna paint over the rust.
Don't use goodies. Helping the neighborhood. organize some trash for the neighborhood so the neighborhood can be more better and beautiful. We're doing how violence needs to be stopped, and right now we're trying to see where we can put our poster.
It helps our school and it makes our school look pretty.
Once we're cleaned it and tried to make it look nice, I think more people will come out and try to exercise and play on the track.
Thought it would make it look nice. We want it to be able where people drive by and go, oh, look at that nice school. Like when they slow down, they normally when they see good things. So slow down to look at it.
Well, because then it helps Flint become a better city and stuff.
Everything that's brighter and nice and newer, it helps people's attitudes.
So have a clean environment. I want it to be better.
Like they say, home is where the heart is.
Home is where their heart is. I love that. Those are mostly seventh graders, just to give you a sense of it. They basically they were we did an internship for one student who learned how to kind of do documentary filmmaking and stuff. So she did these films with the kids. I didn't tell you about the context of Flint. Suffice it to say, Flint is what we call, we as in the field, not we as in my colleagues necessarily, a legacy city, a city that was a vibrant city. Flint was the center of Genesee County and is the county seat. It was one of the highest per capita incomes in the early 60s. There were 70,000 GM jobs. It's the home of the UAW. So there's been conflict of, the management and whatnot there, but 70,000 jobs, vibrant. People had good jobs. They had health insurance. They had retirement benefits. Today, there are 7,000 jobs and everybody left. People left, followed the factory, followed the jobs. That happened in Youngstown, Ohio, in Saginaw, Michigan. It happened in Camden, New Jersey. It was the home of Campbell's Soup, but is no longer. It was the home of RCA, is no longer. And Youngstown was another steel town. It's not far from here. So, what happens in those cities is they're built for one size population. They all leave, and what's left is empty houses and empty streets and people with who are under or unemployed. So what we did is we created this program, and it's the idea of how having kids work together on a common theme. So the curriculum is focused on this idea of empowerment theory. And just real quickly, and I'm so far behind, but we started a little bit late, so I'll talk a little bit faster. Is the idea of empowerment processes, helping people engage, working with each other, developing skills, leads to feeling efficacious and acting and being critical thinkers to positive outcomes. And this is the idea of the S program, was basically that it would be the empowerment processes to lead to kids to feeling more empowered. And then that feeling of empowerment would lead to more positive behaviors. So the project goals of this project, that's them painting a mural. They're first whitewashing the side of the building. They had to learn that you had to get permission to paint on that building. They learned how to do that. They learned how to design and actually implement a mural. So I'll talk about that in a minute. Project goals, their units are leadership, where they learn about how to work with each other and how to kind of lead a project. They learn about their community. They do photo voice. They do a photo voice activity. They do a windshield tour. They think critically about their communities. They start thinking about improving their community, what they could do, all in service to the final product, which is planning for and implementing change. And then at the end, we have them reflect on their experiences. So I'm going to play another real quick. I know I have to play it over here.
I think that our Yes program this year has really empowered the students that were involved with the planning process and the implementation process.
The whole point of having this project is to show our community that young people can basically make a project that can help our community and stop violence.
We do need a change, and the change is the children. You know, it sounds very cliche, but the children are the future.
Helping the community, it helps everyone around it, helps you.
The YES program is an asset because it builds pride amongst the children.
It shows our school spirit. Yeah.
Getting this opportunity to do something positive for their school and their community, and then being able to show it off and take pride and be like, I did that. I made that happen. See all those kids play basketball out there? I made that happen. I think that's something that they're going to always remember. We get a chance to think and even just to know that there's something else going on. You know, they don't have to sit at home and watch TV. They can really be involved in something that's positive, something that's going to help them.
I do think that it will help me later on in life with work, finding a job, college.
Probably talk to any politician or any person who left, you know, their community, went to college, came back. This is what they wanted. They wanted to change. And it's going to have an impact on our community because they're going to want to become leaders, or they're going to be looking around like, hey, I really can change something.
I think it also gave them the confidence to take on bigger tasks that they didn't think were possible. And I think that this is really, really going to help them in their future. And they did it themselves. It's pretty cool.
The kids is definitely the key. There's nobody else. It's the kids.
So rather than just have you hear that, hear what the kids are saying, let me just share some evaluation results. We did some process evaluation. And what we found was the kids were talking about, well, the adults are too controlling here. I was telling the story yesterday about we had retired teachers volunteer to be the teachers and the facilitators to work with the kids to implement their change project that they defined, that they identified, whether it was a mural or a community garden. And the kids complained that the adults were too controlling. So we learned, of course, what are teachers good at? Teachers are good at controlling classrooms. That's one of the things they learn. So we changed the next year and we recruited some college students to work. We paid the college students to be to volunteer with the kids to help them implement what they were doing. But the original study, and we learned some other things, and I won't go into all those details. This is an important point. It wasn't a control group. We did look at pre-post around the sites where they actually did a physical change. Some of them created celebrations in their community. So some of it was social change, where they actually gave awards to people who cleaned up their properties and it looked nice. And we started getting calls from everybody. I heard about this award thing. I want to go. We ended up having almost 100 people attend this award ceremony that the kids organized and emceed and the whole thing. But when we looked at the ones where they changed the spaces, where they put in a mural or put in a garden, we then looked at crime pre-post around that. And so we looked at 100 meters, 200 meters, 300 meters. And what this data is showing you is before the project, there was consistently more violence right around that space. The further away we got, the less the effects are. So that in a way supported our hypothesis that this made a difference. But the design was not a control group. So we don't know if it was just went down for because the crime was just overall going down. So it was pre-experimental, but it was some evidence. And the other piece of evidence that added to our belief that maybe this was going on is that we saw the effect dissipating the further away you got, which also made conceptual sense that you wouldn't expect it to have an effect. And what was interesting is we were one of the first people who basically said, when would these changes, how far away would they start making less effect? And about 300 meters is where we saw, and you can see at about 400 meters, it made no difference at all. Just to give you a sense of those of you who don't know what 400 meters might look like, it's 4 football fields. A football field's about 100 meters. So you can imagine. And then it led us, we were looking at circles around each point, the point being the mural. We've changed some of our analysis and the way we do this, and but this is the beginning of where we're going. Real quickly, we also found effects 30-day results for positive behaviors. There were had larger effects on positive behaviors because it was a positive behavior activity. One thing in behavioral science is when you have the intervention is mostly supposed to do, is focus on a particular behavior, it's more likely to have an effect on that than it would be on, but that it's not necessarily focused on. So, but we found effects after 30 days, pre-post controls and all that kind of stuff. And it was some semi-randomized trial, and I'll answer those questions if you're interested. But these are all published. If you're interested in any of this, we can send you this. 30-day results, we found for aggressive behavior, the effects were somewhat slightly different. They reduced aggressive behaviors compared to the comparison group. However, not as strong effects. The effects are smaller, but that's because, again, the Youth Empowerment Solutions Project was oriented towards the more positive kinds of behaviors. So you would expect it to have those kind of effects. This is one of their murals. I don't have time to really talk about this, but just look at this. This is their story, but you can see what they're learning about racism and alcohol. The racism, you can see the slave ships, and you could probably see a gun there. All those things are sinking to the bottom. On the left-hand side are buildings representing adults. This is, by the way, their story, not mine. This is their design, not mine. I'm just telling you what they told me. On the right-hand side are flowers. Those are young people representing renewal. Those two populations are not really connecting, except because the bridge doesn't fully connect. But what does connect them? The Love Boat. To give you a sense of how big this is, these are the kids who did it. By the way, IRB, we had permission from all their parents, and it was a 6-page IRB approval, 6 pages. It was kind of nuts if you ask me, but we had IRB approval and parental approval and kids' assent to have their pictures in this. So I am being ethical. But this, you can see how tall it was. You can see how big it was. So this work, when we saw the greening in that uncontrolled study, we was like, well, this is sort of really interesting. And so we discovered CPTED, what is called CPTED, Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. Mostly, somewhat of an architectural, but mostly a criminal justice approach to this. And that kind of led to all our greening work that we started doing in the Youth Violence Prevention Center. And I'm going to really speed up because I do want to leave time for questions. But that led to the greening work we do, which is we started working on street faces, block to corner to corner, basically a block on both sides of the street. And in Flint, because of the vacancy rates are high because people left the areas, and we've replicated this in Youngstown as well. There's lots of vacancy. Houses that are abandoned, sometimes they're boarded up, sometimes people live in them. But a lot of times those houses have been demolished, and now there's an empty lot, overgrown, sometimes garbage dumped on them. So as part of the Michigan Youth Violence Prevention Center, we started looking into if we change that, what happens? And so the idea of cleaning up after yourself. And this is a typical street in Flint. This is actually one of the nicer streets. But we created this idea of busy streets as a counterpart to broken windows. You probably have heard of broken windows. One broken window leads to another broken window leads to people thinking no one's watching here. So this is a place where we can do our nefarious activities, whether it's firearm purchasing, whether it's drug use and purchase and selling, and whether it's prostitution or whatever is going on or gang activity, fewer eyes in the street. So we said, well, what happens if we build it? What happens if more people, if we engage people in cleaning that up and being involved in that? And of course, that's exactly what we found. 2 necessary conditions. Did I skip a slide? 2 necessary conditions is improving physical spaces and engaging residents. This is basically the idea of how it works. Community change, improving it in some way, creates safer streets, more healthy streets, and better psychological well-being. That's the idea of busy streets. And we have found 40% declines in randomized trials where we're looking at streets where we clean them up and streets where we don't, and or where weren't cleaned up, and there were fewer assaults and violent crimes on the streets where we did the work. Some of the activities that we've done, I'm going to play a couple of quotes.
At least knowing that, hey, there's good people out here and a lot of people willing to help. Before it was kind of doom and gloom. It's giving a little bit of a different perspective now.
So we did also qualitative data to ask the people on the street, so it's not all quantitative. Another quote.
Everyone feels like we're growing closer as a community, at least knowing that, hey, there's good people out here and a lot of people willing to help. Before it was kind of doom and gloom. It's giving a little bit of a different perspective now.
That's the one you just heard, isn't it? Maybe it was the top one.
People just really need to see that, hey, somebody does care about this, other than just us. We're not in this alone. And as long as we're not in this alone, we'll take ownership and responsibility.
By the way, that isn't the real people saying those. Those are real quotes, but I asked my colleagues to read these things. In terms of psychological well-being, I'm going to play just one of these.
It's cleaner, it's brighter, feels better. Feels like a neighborhood people love and care about.
So that work led us to an opportunity to the National Center for Child Health and Human Development put out a call for proposals saying we need to identify the next 5 years. What are some of the most important issues that we have to pay attention to developmentally and about human development over the next 5 years? Give us a proposal of what you would do and what topic you would focus on. It could have been something about cognitive development. It could have been something about, some pediatric issue that I'm not aware of, that's on the clinical side. But my emergency room, emergency department colleague and I said, let's gamble and go for firearm violence. This was at a time when Sandy Hook had just happened. And before the federal government had sort of started going back into this kind of research. So we created this firearm safety among children and teens. We did literature reviews as part of this. We created a community, a national advisory board, and a group of bringing together the 17 or so people who were studying firearms in America. We had a postdoc program. We created a data repository, and that led to all sorts of other things, but we started focusing on what do we need to do to address this violence and this, in particular, firearm epidemic that's happening in the country today. So we kind of developed that. We have one of the postdocs is now a faculty member at BU doing really cool stuff. Another one's at Washington University, University of Washington. We have literature reviews out in the literature and out there at this point too. And you can see all those if you're interested. That also then led us thinking about treating people, and another lesson to be learned. And that led to the National Center for School Safety. That was where some of the data that we were talking about as a result of the Sandy Hook Promise Foundation was created after the Sandy Hook shooting. You may have seen Nicole Hockley and Mark Harden kind of, they're the leaders and they kind of organize it. They were responsible for the STOP grants, which are basically funding for creating school safety. And their approach, as is our approach, is that firearms are the tip of the iceberg. That firearms is, oh, I thought that was a fire alarm. Firearms is the end result, but there's all these precursing events that occur. And so as I talked about before, one of the things we focus on, this is a training and technical assistance mostly workshop. We try to drive evidence-based strategies for school safety. And this is where we talk about, it's not just about the school, it's about the community, and it's about preparing schools to create safe environments for their kids. And we talk about starting at school climate, because if you can have a metal detector and you can prevent a gun from coming into school, but If a kid is thinking they need to bring a gun to school, either to protect themselves or to get even or for whatever reason, you've already lost that battle. And so we try to talk about all the things you need to do. And we talk about three kinds of environments in schools. One is the social environment, that's the school climate, social emotional learning. An attentive environment, the big thing that's going on in the United States today is our anonymous reporting systems, which are, Michigan, after we had the school shooting in Oxford, mandated an anonymous reporting system for all schools. We did a randomized controlled trial in Miami. It's better if you have what we found for an anonymous reporting system, if there's training for kids, but there's anonymous reporting systems, and I can tell you more about those, or mental health first aid is another one of attentive environment, or threat assessment, so that you get to people before the problem comes to the tip of that iceberg, is the idea, is you identify people in need and you get to them first. And then thirdly, we talk about the physical environment, locking doors, but we're driven by the evidence base that exists. There isn't a lot of evidence, for example, that cameras or metal detectors in schools work to keep them safe. There is evidence for the other ones. And so you can go to our website there and learn all about that. This is the kind of different activities that we focus on, everything from mental health and campus security to, as I said, school climate and threat assessment. That led my colleague in the FACTS program became the vice president for research at the University of Michigan, convinced the then president to invest in an Institute for Firearm Injury Prevention, and that's been the focus of my work now. We've done lots of activities, again, driven by evidence and evidence base, but we have a research and scholarship core, which is pilot studies and methods. Education core, we have the first T32 that's focused on, that's absolutely 100% focused on firearm injury in the United States. We have a community engagement core, data methods, which is a repository, excuse me, and then a policy core. And so we're really trying to translate all that work that we're doing and keep continually using an evidence-based, data-driven outcomes to really try to make places safe so that schools can be a place of learning again, so communities can be a place of having fun and dancing a lot. And that was one of the last lessons that I learned in kindergarten. So I'd like to end with a song that the kids in Yes once did. And let me just do this real quickly. This is a song that they created and recorded. And this is them right there. That's a picture of them. So usually what I do at this point, now maybe it's a little too early in the morning, but you're supposed to get up and dance. Thank you so much.